Hey everyone, welcome to the Sparks of Light guest series. My name is Dr. Elisha Goldstein. I host this. Today we have a truly special episode that you won't want to miss. So let me ask you a couple questions. Do the holidays bring kind of a mix of excitement and also anxiety? Maybe when it comes to family gatherings or gathering with people that you haven't seen in a while? Are you curious about how to navigate some of these tricky family dynamics, or maybe set healthy boundaries, or still find the joy and connection in these gatherings that are there? So to help us dive deeper into this, we are joined by the renowned therapist and author, Susan Stiffelman, who is author of some best-selling books, including Parenting Without Power Struggles and also Parenting with Presence. Her insightful approach mixes not only the wisdom from her decades of experience in this field, but also really practical applications and insights that we're going to be sharing through this. In this interview, we're going to be covering everything from managing holiday stress and conflict to also enjoying it all amidst the chaos. Susan shares her expert strategies in here for dealing with loss and grief during this time. She offers advice on how to handling differing views that people might be bringing with all the world events that are happening right now. You're going to gain practical tips and insights, so get ready, get out your Word document or get out a pen and paper and get ready to take notes, because trust me, this is going to be an interview you're going to want to revisit year after year. So without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Susan Stiffelman to help us unpack the insights for a stress-free holiday with our family and friends. Here's the interview. Welcome, Susan, and thank you for joining us. I'm really happy you're here.
I'm so glad to be here with you, Elisha.
So let's just jump in. So the holidays are here, and this time, as everyone knows, is unique in impacting family dynamics. For you, who's had so much experience working with families and parenting, what do you see as some of the common stressors that people face during this time?
I think a lot of it can be boiled down to expectations. It's such an anticipated period of the year, whether it's that you're going to see family, you're going to get some time off, you're going to go on a vacation, you're going to have more family time just to be quiet, to unplug or relax, whatever it is that you're hoping will happen. There's definitely an image that a lot of us have. And one of the riskiest parts of being a human being is that the image that we have of our idealized situation or child or person or partner or whatever job is sometimes a mismatch to reality. And I think that if I were to kind of look for the root, because I'm always interested not in dealing kind of with the surface manifestation of an issue, but with what's at the root of it, I think at the root is, what were you hoping or expecting or needing or believing you needed to happen at this gathering or during this time or on this vacation?
So with that said, so that comes, I love that, because it's oftentimes the case that you walk into a place or a gathering, and if you don't meet your expectations, there's a dissonance, and then you feel this dissonance and there's this dis-ease that's there. So what's a good way to prepare if you know that that may be what's happening as you're going to a family gathering, or even, and we'll talk about this, maybe we won't piggyback at this now, but we'll talk about this in a little bit, or maybe you already anticipate a loss that's there. But if you know that there's something there might be some friction, how do you prepare for that?
I call it making friends with the worst case scenario.
Uh-huh.
That you actually, not to manifest this, and not to, kind of weigh yourself down, but to say, okay, well, the worst thing that might happen is grandpa might completely ignore me because of my politics, and my sister-in-law might snub me in some way or say something unpleasant to my partner. The cousins might, lock our little Johnny in the closet again, whatever it is, and not that we want those things to happen, but if we can find a way to kind of line up with the part of us that would be okay, that would survive that, it's more empowering, maybe even to remember, what, the last time, we were with grandpa, he was actually really sweet, or my sister-in-law was very kind, but I can remember a couple of times before that it was rough. And here's how I got through that. Because we're far more resourceful than we realize or that we remember. And when we're bracing ourselves for something that we hope doesn't happen, instead of being sort of relaxed around, I hope the thing I want to happen does. And if it doesn't, I can remember how I managed that, maybe not with that person, but maybe in another situation that's similar enough that I did survive it. And the other thing to remember, that this has been my lived experience being at the stage of life I'm at. There's that beautiful story about the guy who falls off the horse in the village and breaks his leg, and somebody hears about it and says, "Oh, that's terrible." And he says, "We'll see." And then something else happens. It turns out that the young son, his son doesn't have to go off to war because he has a broken leg. So many times the outcome, the longer term outcome of a difficulty in a situation with family or loved ones, or ends up being exactly what we needed to grow closer to that person or to become more resilient ourselves. So we can have the bigger perspective that even if things just go south, they really don't go the way we wanted, there well may be a positive outcome down the road.
Yeah, I love that story. Then maybe so, maybe not in some way. I've so many examples of that exact type of thing where it's like, oh, this was so hard, but and then it led to this other thing,
Yeah,
right? This learning or this growth or that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, so that's kind of some way of preparing. A lot of when we're talking about relationships, oftentimes we hear in the field of therapy or psychology or mental health in general, the idea of boundaries. And, so what would you say in order to prepare to set healthy boundaries, maybe with family members during the holidays to protect your emotional well-being?
yeah.
If you know that you're going in there and there might be some of that, what would you say what are some tips or something that we can work with to start
Yeah.
with healthy boundaries?
I did a class this year with Terry Cole, who wrote the book Boundary Boss. And it was so fun because when I read the book, I was like, I am absorbing this book in 1 day or 2 days. Because I found myself, I identified as the high functioning codependent,
Uh-huh.
making sure everyone's okay, nobody's hungry, everybody's warm enough, everybody has a connection with somebody. What I've been learning personally in this process, as well as working with all of the people who come to me, is that we know, in a way, I can give you some suggestions, but I'm really into the kind of addressing our own wise self or inner child, whatever label you want to use. And so what I would ask in addressing that question would be for parents or for people to say, what do I need? Because only an individual ultimately knows. I need to know that I'm only going to be here for an hour and a half, and to kind of lay the foundation and plant that seed ahead of time. Listen, we're so excited to see you all. Turns out, da 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 da. And to give yourself something in advance. Or some people might say, what I really need is to have an ally at that gathering, which might be your brother-in-law's
Mm.
cousin. And so you make contact with your brother-in-law's cousin ahead of time and say, hey, listen, I know that these situations can be a little bit tense sometimes or stressful, lots of expectations, a lot of people, a lot of noise. Can you and I make a pact right now that we'll sort of be able to check in with each other? For other people, it might be what you need is more understanding. Let's say you have a youngster who's on the spectrum or who just has ADHD, maybe a little bit more not as good with lots of noise, people stimulation, or they're more, you have a child or you yourself are more introverted. But particularly if it's about your child, you might call your parents ahead of time if that's where you're going and say, listen, we want this to work out really well. We're so excited to see you. Is there a spare room where I can take Elizabeth, and we can just kind of take a pause once in a while? Would that work for you? Because I know that you want her to do well as well. And sometimes she gets kind of overstimulated and dysregulated. So you're thinking in advance, but everything you're suggesting is going to be based on you closing your eyes. I know you're so wonderful at all of this, Elisha, and you're checking in with yourself and listening to that still, quiet voice saying, this would make this go better for me. And not necessarily for my kids, for my partner, but asking yourself on your own behalf, because a lot of times we put ourselves last. Oh, I'm going to plow through because of my parents are so excited to see this kids. I'm going to soldier on, but we end up paying for that. And so what do you need? What do you think you're going to need to make this work for you?
Yeah, I love that because that, being able to, it's almost like you have like a parachute or an out in some way where you're like, I'm gonna go, but there's always this thing I can move towards to take care of myself if I need to.
Yeah.
I remember forever ago when my stepmom offered me to go away for a month, gave me the idea to go away for a month. This was when I was in my mid 20s, sorry, mid late 20s, something like that, and said they wanted me to go away because that was a time when I was just a total mess in my mid to late 20s, and they were like, you need to kind of get out, go get a break somewhere. So I went to this adult retreat, and I didn't really want to go. And she told me, well, you just can go for a day. And if you don't want to, you can always leave. It was the similar idea. Like you have an out if you need it. Here's your safety shoot if you need it, which allowed me to actually go there and then have this incredible experience that,
Wow.
really changed the course of my life. And
Wow.
but anyway, and what you're offering here, I'm just letting that really, it worked for me in a major way. These are kind of smaller gatherings to allow yourself to feel more comfortable in going to something that might seem like really stressful or might feel like that's what's going to be coming up. Yeah, I
And
love
if you want to really be, walk on the wild side, and you have the kind of relationship with the family members who you're going to be gathering with, you can say ahead of time, ideally in person versus email, I love you guys, and I think it's going to be so wonderful to be together. And I've been kind of really looking at this little part of me that's a little nervous and a little bit anxious. And I just wanted to put it in front of you and sort of be honest about that there is this little part I'm bringing along that's a little anxious, that maybe you guys won't be impressed with what I've been doing lately, or maybe there'll be conversations about how the kids are that you won't approve of something that we've done, or maybe you'll want to give me advice about my job. So I just wanted you to know that I love you, and there's this part of me that's a little anxious and nervous, and maybe and then you either can say, and could we have a signal if I'm starting to feel a little overloaded, or you can just say, can you just sort of keep that in mind? You don't have to take it too far, but we look at vulnerability and honesty and how powerful they are. It can potentially change the tenor of everything when somebody is brave enough to say, I'm actually feeling a little bit nervous about our time together. Just wanted you to know, can't wait to see you.
Yeah, that takes a lot of courage to be able to do that, and feeling of feeling safe in somebody, or a
Yeah,
lot of confidence, or and it can be so powerful. Vulnerability is where the gold lies. And to have that reminded me, just kind of top of mind, of that what you had said a moment ago, which was if there's any allies. And so the way you're speaking is almost speaking to some allies in some way, like be an ally or trust that maybe they can be an ally. Or are there people who
right.
can be an ally? Yeah.
Give the person a chance who you think is going to be your adversary, to say, listen, it's been a long time since we've seen each other, and I want you to know how I have most of me is just really looking forward to it. And there's another part of me, I don't know about you, but I'm a little nervous. And suddenly that whole thing may transform, and they may say, well, you know what? I'm kind of nervous too. The last time we were together was a bit difficult.
Wow. And then there's a connection. That is really helpful. I want to also talk about another area of the holidays where a lot of people experience, which is around grief and loss, anniversary reactions. What's your experience in walking into the holiday? No doubt people have already been experiencing this. And by the way, everything that Susan and I are talking about right now, we're talking about how it's amplified during the holidays, but this is always
Yeah.
helpful in any different time of the year or any day when you're going into a family gathering or a gathering of friends,
Yeah.
and you're feeling, what you're feeling right now. And so how can families support each other in your experience in processing these emotions that are coming up?
Yeah. I think my favorite word around all of that is tenderness.
Mm,
And again, not necessarily saying let's have a big sit down and talk about our feelings about how we're missing Uncle Joe at the table. He's been such an integral part of our family for all these years, but maybe to have some kind of recognition or brief honoring of, we're all missing Uncle Joe here. And it might be that with your family, there's a little ritual where everyone goes around the table and remembers something about Uncle Joe or shares how it's been for them, or if that's the person obviously who's passed. And it doesn't have to be someone who recently passed. It could be, every year at this time of year, we think about Dad and we just miss him so much. And we're all, if you're speaking on your own behalf, I'm really happy to be here. And it's also extra painful because sometimes being with family reminds you of the absence of this person that you love, that you're not really thinking about other times quite as much, because if you're with your neighbors, you're with your work people, they aren't going to be reflecting back to you the loss of this beloved person in your life that was a part of your family, like your family will. That's the kind of the milieu where that person probably was front and center. I'm just such a big fan, Elisha, of being honest and saying, I'm really thinking a lot about him, or I'm really sad, or there may be times when somebody feels like they can't join the celebration. It's just too heavy. And then you can say, I want to be there, and I don't know, maybe it's a very recent loss. I wonder if we could just exchange our gifts one-on-one this year. I just don't know if I can show up with all of my, again, that would be a very recent loss, but tenderness we all know it. It's like, it when you see it. It has its own feeling, and it has no personal agenda. It has no score to settle. It's just an acknowledgement of your raw and hurting heart. And it can call forth a lot of connection with family when it's handled very sweetly and kindly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the feeling I got from, I'm hearing kind of a theme of being genuine. And then I'm remembering what you said earlier, because I'm sensing into this as you're talking about it. And I'm like, it first starts with kind of being genuine with yourself, and sensing into what would it be like to be tender with myself. And then I hear you talking about naming what's here, like for the loss, like naming the person, naming the feeling that might be there, because other people, you're never the only one having that,
right?
Especially if it's a family, everyone knows the person that's not there anymore. And it's something powerful to that. And again, what that breeds, to me, what I hear from you and saying that, is connection.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's such a thing to be a human.
I'll use that quote.
It's just beautiful and hard and complex. And I just think that when we walk into situations or approach a certain time that has a lot of charge potentially built into it, even the simple act of putting your hands on your face with kindness and going, oh, this is really hard. And just being with that and offering yourself what you would like to get from someone else. Sometimes, Elisha, this is kind of crazy, but when I'm in a situation where I'd like to feel heard, I want to express myself and I'd like to feel heard about some grievance, something that didn't go the way I want, I give it to myself. So it'll be like, oh, Susie, really were hoping that they would have noticed how much effort you put into the da 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 da. And instead, they just sort of, blew it off. And how was that for you? And then I answer for myself, oh, it was really hard and it hurt my feeling. Yeah, I could see where that might happen. Not that we sort of intellectualize ourselves out of it, but ultimately, when we're upset or sad or hurt, mostly, this, we just want to have someone hear us so we can give ourselves that. We can't force anyone else to really validate and acknowledge what we're going through, but we can offer that to ourselves. And I'm finding it incredibly powerful to just talk to myself and offer myself that kind of comfort. Oh,
Yeah.
that was really
Yeah.
hard.
And that's what do you notice when you do that?
My nervous system immediately settles down, and I find myself more regulated. I find my heart softening, sometimes
Mm,
getting kind of warm and gooey. And the beauty is we think that we need it to come from the person who, offended us or ignored us or whatever it was. And yeah, it would be great. And there's a lot of potential for deepening a connection when people can hear each other. But to sort of really scratch that itch that inner child, we can actually give it to ourselves and say, I could say to myself, Susie, you walked in that gathering, and I think it looks like you were hoping that, people would really notice that you were here and, come and give you a big hug. And instead it seemed like there was so much going on in that particular moment that you felt sort of invisible. And how was that for you? And then I answer, oh, felt kind of rotten, like in middle school. Yeah, I could see where it would. That
yeah. I could definitely see how that would work and have an impact. I mean, it's a similar experience in some ways to practices around self-compassion, where
yeah,
there's some needs we have, which is to feel held, to feel cared about. And I think a lot of us in this culture feel like we have to get like it has to be external in some way. And when you feel into being able to sense into the connection you can give yourself too, that
uh-huh.
tenderness that you're talking about, being genuine with yourself, there is an impact on your body and your nervous system, at least for me too, and people I've worked with, and I know people you've
Yeah,
worked with as well. And so that practice that you say about kind of having a dialogue, you're not just in your head doing it, you're actually like kind of genuine on both sides. So that's like that means you're embodied. And then from that place, I think when I'm more genuine with myself, it's easier for me to actually connect with other people sometimes too.
yes, exactly. I agree.
Yeah. So I'm going to throw you a little bit of a ringer now. So prepare
Okay.
yourself. So, there's a lot going on in the world, and um, and there's going to be people that you're going to be in. I mean, especially maybe during this time when you're going to gatherings, they're going to have different views than you, or that someone on the other end of this listening to this right now might know that might be happening, or just be very extreme, even in a view you agree with, just be very extreme and always talking about it, and always, whether it's
Uh,
stuff happening in the Middle East or whether it's stuff happening in other areas or just the politics of this country.
yeah,
So what's the preparation for that, or how do you manage that
yeah.
when you're there? Yeah.
It really does start with what happens inside. Sometimes I work with, I have a monthly membership and I meet with parents twice a month. And sometimes a parent will show up for coaching or have a question, but especially if they show up and they just feel flimsy. I talk in my work about being the captain of the ship with our kids, where we inhabit this role of being steady, calm, regulated, decisive, clear, kind, connected, all these wonderful things. And and a lot of parents aspire to that, but it's not intuitive. They move into what I call lawyer mode, where they're constantly arguing and negotiating, or dictator mode, where the kid is sort of calling the shots and you're there feeling out of control and desperate. And so, what is it to inhabit that place of sturdiness? I do this exercise that actually I'm in a group called the Association of Transformational Leaders, and one of our members, um, Jack Canfield, I don't know if you know him, he demonstrated this
Who
with
is it,
me.
Jack Canfield? Well, maybe if you don't know who Jack Canfield is, you're on the other end of this, and it's good to
Yeah,
come
but
up.
I raised my hand to be the person that he demonstrated this on, and he had me stand up and he had me close my eyes and sort of picture a scenario where I felt out of control or weak or like not very empowered. And he gently pushed my shoulder, and I lost my balance right away.
Hmm.
And then he had me do it again, and he said, imagine that from the heavens, a steel rod is coming down through the top of your head, through your body, splitting down your legs, going down, 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 all the way into the earth. And it's immovable. It's so rigid and strong, the steel rod, that it plants you there and nothing can move you. And I just pictured it. He pushed my shoulder. He couldn't move me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was such a physical experience of what it's like to just root ourselves in a place of strength. So my answer to your curveball is that it starts with something even like that. Maybe before you get out of the car, you run that visualization of yourself with that steel rod, with that clarity, with that, decisiveness, with that self-respect and self-regard. And from that place, then you might say, okay, I'm going to go into this situation, and there may be, I know so-and-so is really verbal and quite loud and likes to dominate the conversation and has very complicated views about various political situations or situations around the world. And just again, what do I need to hold on to that steel rod feeling? And it might be that you approach that person right off the bat and they start in on you and you say, I love you. I'm so happy to see you. And I've made a decision, steel rod, steel rod, steel rod.
Holding on to that.
To sort of table that for the next couple of hours and just spend time together. Now that person might say, oh, right, put your head in the sand. Yeah.
For you
put
to
the
do.
blinders on. Easy for you to do. Not easy, but I've made a decision. And that phrase, whether you use the word decision or not, but this is what feels right for me. If nothing else, you're getting to practice this really important skill of assertiveness so that you set a boundary. You say, here's what I would love to talk with you after dinner. Let's you and I just sit together for a few minutes. Maybe that's what you offer. The other thing, because of the work that I do, is that your kids get to see you modeling this. What is it like to just walk into a potentially, flammable situation with people and advocate for yourself by first anchoring yourself to yourself and then thinking, what do I need? What will make this work for me?
So as we come back to boundaries. We come back to how do you embody that boundary? It sounds like that kind of the steel pole, so you can feel it in your body. It sounds like so you're not easily tipped over like you were, like Jack was able to tip you over, but you're not able to when you're in that type of place, and you're preparing.
Yeah.
So you're reducing your anxiety a little bit.
Yes.
Feeling a bit prepared. So I'm hearing you say, and how powerful that I love that modeling it. And there's something very attractive about that too, when you can be assertive in that way, but like friendly, assertive, polite about it. And I think other people, it's really respect that. The person you might be doing that with, I don't know, maybe so many not, but other people, if they're overhearing that, they're like, wow, they're really in their power.
And they may call you a name. They may overtly or behind your back say, and then you have the compassion to say that's as far along as that person is in this particular area. They're probably more evolved than me in certain other things, but in this area, they haven't gotten to the place yet where to say this doesn't work for me doesn't sound like you're being selfish or entitled or, a bad person, a mean person, I think many of us will identify with the difficulty because of our programming in knowing what the difference is between advocating for yourself out of self-respect and compassion and clarity and being selfish and self-absorbed. Many of us been taught that to be a good person means that you say yes, that you disregard what you want or you need. And I think sometimes we err on the side too much of here's what I want and everything has to happen this way. I'm not talking at all about that. We need to flex. We need to accommodate other people. We need to be kind and gracious and sometimes give a little more than we'd like or tolerate a boring conversation. But if it's disturbing you and you say nothing, then I don't think that you're helping anyone.
Yeah. I'm reminded when you're talking about being the captain, I'm reminding of your book, Parenting Without Power Struggles, and then Parenting with Presence that came after that. And then as you're speaking right now, I'm reminded of a term that I wrote in one of my books called being an ambassador of compassion. So you kind of walk into this and you're walking into this potential conflict and you have this idea that I'm going to be an ambassador of compassion. And so what does that mean? That's outwardly. So I love the way that you say, like, that's as far as long as this person has gotten, and they're likely in pain and they're clearly
Yeah.
suffering. I know so many people that they're so vigilant right now with things that are happening in the world and also feeling and suffering quite a bit
Mhm.
personally. And um and so ambassador of compassion means not just for this person, but also for yourself too, because of course
Mhm.
compassion is incomplete without ourselves. And so we have to bring it to ourselves because it's we're going to get triggered and hooked too. And so we're kind of sending it
Yeah.
both ways.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that phrase, Elisha. And the other is that sort of what am I putting into the room? Terry Real, who we love his work on relationships, and he talks about the biosphere, and that basically in all relationships we share the same air. And
Mm.
so when you look at if you can bring yourself in as an ambassador of compassion with a certain softness, with a tolerance, with a larger view, people do the best they can with the resources they have generally, and maybe it doesn't look like the best because you would do better, but you don't know the story that they've lived and the life that the challenges that they're facing. And but
Yeah.
it doesn't mean if you're disturbed you can absolutely say, I love you and I'm glad to see you, and I'm not able to keep having this conversation right now. I would love to talk about something else, or maybe we can revisit it after dinner.
Amazing. I'm reminded of a conversation like this that happened in my family like a week ago.
Oh.
And I'm thinking more of like my nephew and my niece who are in their early 20s who are having this kind of like battle between each other, and and just watching one of them just really say exactly what you just said right now. And so just thinking that that's coming from you and watching, I remember being so
Oh,
impressed. I'm like,
wow.
wow, he can really say that, and
Yes.
that was really, impressive. He was kind of saying, hey, this is where I'm at. We can't do this, with what's happening right now, and let's just do something.
Wow.
It's kind of powerful. It was really cool.
Beautiful.
I'm gonna shift us just slightly because I'm also aware of our time. And so here we are. We know that stress isn't just like a single event and it builds up over time. And like the holidays are something that happens for a while now. I remember Halloween was over and there was already the holiday stuff was already out. Right. And so it kind of builds. And so stress as it builds has an impact on our body and our minds. And so how do we what are some things that in your experience that are more around like self-care during this time for maintaining more of our mental health during these the
Mhm.
holidays and the gatherings to come or that they've happened or yeah.
That's great. Well, one thing that's kind of sweet to do is to actually sit down if you have 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and write down the things that bring you rest or
Um,
joy or comfort. I have a friend, a psychologist, a dear friend of mine named Robin Posen. She's in her 80s, and she has this phrase, rest is a sacred act.
hmm,
And she wrote a book called Go Only as Fast as Your Slowest Part Feels Safe to Go. And it's so comforting to just sort of keep that phrase alive. So maybe make a list. Like, what are the things? For me, it's a bath. It might be a bath, a cup of tea, being out in nature. It might be checking in by phone or in person with a friend. I've started learning the ukulele and I've started art class. So now I'm learning to draw and do some things like that. So, whatever it is for you, or an undiscovered thing that you've sort of wanted to do, the holidays can be such a nice time, sweet time to pick up something a little out of your normal activities,
hmm,
something particularly that you enjoyed doing as a child. A lot of times, those are the things that are going to resurface. And make a list of those things, and then I often actually do put them in my calendar just to make sure that they're guarded and protected, and that I'm building into my week a little bit of time to do these fun things or these things that kind of offset some of the stress that of life. The other is, to consider. I love so much Eckhart Tolle's work, and um, this idea. He's not the only one, but that when we're stressed, quite often we're either in the past, kind of regurgitating some stressful event that already happened that's over, but we're replaying it and our whole nervous system is activated again. Or we're projecting something into the future that we're afraid will happen, we're dreading it. And so, again, our nervous system is activated and our stress levels go up. The challenge is, like you and I might have very, very stressful situations that we're going to face with even as soon as we're finished. But in this moment, we're both fine.
Mm-hmm.
I had a private session with a parent today who's facing just a lot of very intense and stressful things with a narcissistic co-parent, and a lot of difficulty and sadness on behalf of the kids. And I said, and now can you work with it? Because the kids wanted tools. And one of them, I said, is as simple as Eckhart does this. You rub your hands together until they feel warm, and you then feel the warmth and the friction, and you're back here in your body. You, I know, have done so much with mindfulness-based stress and reduction. And so you're really the master, but anything that both nourishes your spirit and that also brings you back into the present moment, I think can be helpful.
Fun little thing that I was just on a call with a group of people like maybe 2 weeks ago. And and I do this with them sometimes where we go out and I bring them through like a walking practice outside where the heck they are, right? Wherever we are, it doesn't matter. And this one guy said, while we were doing that, and this is, now as you're listening to this, you might hear some judgments in your mind, but just like to bring a beginner's mind to it for a second, not you, but anyone that might be listening. And he saw a tree and he went over to the tree and he was feeling kind of stressed and he hugged the tree and held the tree and his body totally relaxed. So to me, I'm like, all right, the proof is in the eating of the pudding, right? We can say like, tree hugger, whatever. Right? But like, proof is in the eating of the pudding. And as he said that, you know what I did? I went over to a tree as he was talking. I did the same thing, and a big smile came to my face, and I did that. We think of like, what are decompressing activities that we can do? Like you said, make a list, and like you can just start implementing, sprinkling them around like little holiday gifts for yourself, like the day, right? Like type of thing.
Sometimes even putting your hands in warm water. You turn on the tap and you just put your hand, not hot, not cold, just warm water. It might be a certain fragrance or smell. It might be looking at a photograph of your favorite pet that you had. Any of those things can bring you back to, kind of out of the future and past and into a place of appreciation or of lightness or of simplicity.
I think just from that little 3-minute segment of what we just talked about, we could create like a top 10 list of ways to express, and people can listen to that right there. That would be, maybe we'll take that snippet out.
Nice.
So, okay. Final ish question for you. We've talked a lot about, boundaries and challenges and manage expectations and grief and loss and this, but also like taking care of ourselves. This is a really fun last few minutes we just talked about. And so what about in the gathering? Are there things that when you talk about preparing, are there things that you can prepare for to enhance connection and joy? Like these things that we hear about, like holidays are all about, like these types of moments, the awe, the wonder, these kind of more positive psychology type things, or just these good feelings. Like, there things we can prepare to do that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think one thing you could do, although there's always people who show up that weren't expected or who don't make it, you can actually, if possible, have a group email as you get closer to the event and say, could everybody bring one kind of cool thing for us to explore, or one thing that you want to share with your group? And obviously you don't have to prepare. You could also do that going around the table. We often would play this game, 2 truths and a lie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, you write down 3 things and 2 of them are true and 1 isn't. And people have to guess which is the one that isn't true, sort of things that you've done in your life. You can also reach out individually to people, whoever's going to be there, depending if it's a 40-person thing, you might not do it, and just say, I want you to know I'm really looking forward to seeing you. Particularly if you can personalize it and say, Cousin Louie, it's been 8 years since I've seen you, and I just want you to know that I'm really excited that we're going to be in the same place together. My gosh, if I know somebody's looking forward to seeing me, the way I walk into that room is so different.
I love that. And that's such a simple thing. And most of us would never think to do that. And it's so simple. And you're reminding me of it, right? I'm thinking of it. I'm like, wow, that I would really love to employ that. That's like really cool. Yeah.
And even to say, are you, maybe you'll bring your banjo if you know that that's a banjo player, or, I'd love to see photos.
Ukulele.
Your ukulele. I'd love to see photos of your honeymoon, whatever it is, just something that personalizes it, that I'm actually in this moment for 20 seconds, I'm thinking about that I'm going to see you. And you picture people coming into a gathering with that kind of ground, that sort of cultivation, that for something positive and warm to happen. I think we have more control or influence over these family gatherings than we may think. A lot of us stress out, we feel anxious because it feels like it's going to be a free for all. We know what's happened in the past. There's a lot of unpredictability. We know people are amped up. They're eating foods that maybe aren't that stabilizing for them, and they might have trouble. They may be tired. The weather might be rough. And so, there are a lot of elements and variables that might, predispose us to anticipating something that we have to sort of brace ourselves for. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I think we can almost rewrite for ourselves. Even running a movie can be helpful. We look at visualization. So whatever is actually going to happen, put that aside and just close your eyes and picture yourself walking into this gathering, and everyone is smiling at you. And there's so much warmth emanating from every face. And then people one at a time come up and embrace you, and they, hold your hand, and they tell you how glad they are to see you. Now, this may never happen in real life, but the more we get, I've always believed, the more we get familiar with what we want to happen, the more likely we are to spot little bits of evidence that it is happening and magnify those.
I love that. It's as if our brain has a million things going on. There's a million things going on around us at any given moment. And we're selectively paying attention to certain things, not on purpose, just our brain just kind of does that. But if you prime, what I hear you saying, if you prime your mind to say these other things are important, it's more likely to see those things that are happening, and you get to take in what I call these sparks of light.
Right.
And that's the gift.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're vigilant for, oh gosh, I can tell Grandpa's about to start in on things again. He's about to tell me I have the wrong job. But maybe you missed, by thinking that's coming, and you might be right, you might have missed when he winked at you. Like,
right. Yeah. Right. That makes me feel like that's like a precious moment that's there. Would you ever recommend that families or friends or whatever, when they come together around this time, like reflect on the past year and think about what they're wanting for the year to come? Like, would you ever recommend that?
yeah, some families love to do that kind of stuff, and some are going to go, "Oh, brother,
Not again.
here's Miss Touchy Feely," like. And if you're a really sensitive person, I'm sure you have people in your audience who are more the sensitive types. I know I am, and then you might really want it to go deeper. And then some people there might go, "Oh God, can't we just talk about how she made the gravy?" It's like, so you kind of have to read the room.
Yeah, right.
Or you might splinter off with a few people that want to do that with you.
That's a really good idea, actually. That ties into some of the earlier stuff you were talking about on how do you prepare. Like, you might say, I'm gonna pull off with a couple other people. If the big crowd in the group is like just overwhelming, you might already prepare, like, I'm gonna pull aside so and so. I'm gonna connect with them. I'm gonna get some good private time with them.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I love that. So this has been so valuable. I hope everyone who's listening can integrate. I mean, I hope you maybe even like took some notes about what was supportive for you. Go back and listen to it again and take some notes. And you have so many gifts that you've brought to us today. And is there any final thing that you think we might have, that might be like that pearl that we might layer into this right now?
I think that it can be helpful to pick a word and sort of let that be, or a phrase, let that be the thing you put on your bathroom mirror. Maybe you have it on your phone, or you make a little design of it and it becomes your home screen, whatever. It might just be joy. It might be peace. It might be gratitude. It might be simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And so that we create reminders, the version of us in this sane moment when we realize, no, there are things I can do to really have this be a lovely time. Well, that can fly out the window. So it could be this phrase. It could be, I'm going to pull on my right earlobe and re-anchor myself to that intention to do this a little bit differently, to tread more lightly, to hold things less tensely. So reminders can be helpful, and pick the thing that really resonates, that lifts your heart when you say that phrase or that word. For me, joy is such a quick one, and peaceful,
Yeah,
thankful.
that's a really good one. It combines with the visualization of the pole for me that you brought out.
Mm.
Yeah. Where the word is that pole. Yeah. Um, Finally, I just want to know, where can people find out more about you? What do you have going on? And we'd love to hear about that, so we know like how to have opportunities with you. Like, what is
Sure.
that? Yeah.
I have a website.
You
So
do?
I know I have a website,
How'd you get one of those?
susanstiffelman.com. So susanstiffelman.com has all the menus. We're revising it, but it'll show how you can be part of my membership group, which we would love to invite people to do, where I meet with parents twice a month and we talk about everything. We've got the co-parenting with a narcissist. I'm doing a class on January 17th with Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor Mate. That's going to be really great and interesting.
Is that
And
it's on the website too?
that'll be on the website, yeah. And a podcast, Parenting Without Power Circles. I think we have almost a couple million downloads, so it's a pretty great podcast with so many interesting people. I think you've been in there. I know you've been on some of my summits as well. We just did a tech-wise parenting summit with people like Dan Siegel and Kristen Neff and Jack Cornfield and Trudy, and so many great and interesting people. So there's tons of stuff on the site for people, and a newsletter that's free if they just want some inspiration. But I've been doing this such a long time, Elisha, and it's so sweet to be lined up with the thing, as you know, that you were supposed to do, love to do. You get so much nourishment from it. And it's also so sweet to see the younger you guys, you and Stephanie, doing this work, kind of bringing up. So you see coming generations that are so beautifully uplifting people at this time. So thank you for your beautiful work.
Hey, I'll hold that younger label like this as long as
It's all relative.
so yeah, wonderful. Many blessings to everything you have going on. You've helped so many people, and thank you so much, and look forward to being with you again. Everyone check out our website and everything that Susan has, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Elisha.